shall we?
We are 4:01. I think we're gonna have some people online. We got otherwise a full crew in house. Let's start it up.
Okay, there.
Don, are we good?
Sorry.
My Zoom's gotta come back.
Sorry.
Mary, can you say hi?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Hi.
Well, make sure we can hear you. Thank you.
And I think we may have Frank Page coming in virtually. Hello, Mary. Happy New Year.
Gordon, same to you and everyone else.
Thank you.
Same.
All right, we ready to
Shall we
open?
get to it?
Sure.
All right,
Officially open at 4:02.
4:02. Welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
He's fully energized to take this project right where it needs to go.
That would be to the top.
Well played. First item is the approval of the December 1st minutes.
For those
Is there-
online, they were attached to the calendar invitation. We'll have a chance to grab those, and those in the room, they're at your places.
I move to approve the December 1st, 2022 building committee minutes. Second.
Please, Ryan.
In a second, Kathy.
That one.
I know, right? Any further
Any
discussion?
discussion?
Okay,
Seeing
none
none.
heard. I'll go roll call vote on our list of attendees. Mr. Crucial.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm a yes. Ms. Blair.
Yes.
Okay. Did Mr. Page come on?
Not yet.
Not
He
yet.
says that the link he has is not working.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Flat tires. User error.
Oh, updates. Okay. Ms. McNally,
Yes.
Martin Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Penny,
Yes.
Ms. LeVar,
Yes,
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Quimby,
Yes.
and Mr. Christensen. Yes. All right, did I miss anybody? Okay, that passes.
Lovely. Moving on to the public participation piece. Is there any commentary or questions from any of our public attendees?
We're good.
Okay.
You sure you have a quorum over there? You're good? Thank you.
Important people.
Can neither confirm nor deny. Okay, then moving right along, man, we're gonna be done fast. Ben, don't let me down.
I got you, Steve.
Skanska update.
You need me to advance?
Yes, if you could, Gordon.
Oh, he's got it all up here.
All right, so we'll get started kind of just with a recap of where we're at with the schedule. But after our last SBC meeting, where we went through the two different delivery method options that are available for this project, I did go ahead and just develop remember, you had seen all the previous schedules. You've seen basically what we project under the CM approach. And so what we did was we developed another schedule, an alternative schedule, based on the design bid build approach as well, just to compare and show you what that means schedule wise. But we'll just start with where we're at, because ultimately everything between the two delivery methods, the schedule remains the same up through module 5. So we'll start where we're at right now in the preferred schematic report. And so right at this moment, we are currently in the estimating phase. We are estimating the PSR, the 3 different options, the code upgrade, add reno, and then the new building project. So we plan on having the estimates from our 2 individual estimators back to us on, let's see, January 17th, and our reconciliation date is January 20th. So we'll meet on January 20th with the 2 individual estimators, and we'll go through and come up with a reconciled estimate at that point. And then after that, we will be presenting to you folks. I did carry on here just SBC approval of PSR. I'm showing it on Thursday, the 2nd. I can't remember if we formalize a date for what that approval SBC meeting would be. Hopefully we can do that.
Yeah, we've been assuming the 8th, but
The 8th,
none
okay.
of this has been discussed and agreed upon, so.
I guess
Say this for yourself. I like it.
Come on.
Ben, can I ask you a question about that? If we're not able to approve on that date or anywhere near that based on the estimates that we should receive, because we haven't gotten them yet. And it puts our time frame behind schedule, are we able to postpone any of our deadlines moving forward? And I'm talking significantly if needed, just a question. Has it been done and are we allowed to do it through the program?
So as of right now, what you're operating under is what's called the feasibility study agreement. And so the terms of that agreement are ultimately, when you're invited into the feasibility stage, you then have 913 days afterwards to conclude your feasibility study, or it concludes on a successful product scope and budget that is approved by the state, which is what we're projecting and hopeful for the summer. You could, so that I think that so it's like 2.5 years. So I think it puts you sometime in February of 2024 when that would expire.
Okay.
Regardless. So there's a little play there, but not a ton, not a significant.
Potential for an extension on that? Can we request that through SBA?
No,
Not at all.
no, if you don't meet at that point, they'll basically.
Yeah.
That they get rid of you. And then ultimately, when you go back into the program, should you get accepted, the feasibility study then is at the town's cost. The MSBA will not reimburse in that whatsoever.
Just the feasibility though, but we would still be in the program?
You would not still be in the program. You would be booted out of the program. You'd have to resubmit your statement of interest, get accepted back into the program to then start the feasibility study. And then that would all be at town.
So every prior project has stayed on schedule and hasn't had a significant delay, is what we're saying. Up until module 5.
My projects I haven't, and I can't speak to all of them. I can definitely ask the state if that's been done, if it can be done. But I'm not privy to that information right now.
I don't know if we should do that just yet, because that's going to send a bad message, given that we're working off of no data.
Oh, it's just a question.
Right, and if you're them hearing the question, you're gonna be like, what's going on with these?
All right. But if nothing happens from that, it could be a yes. And they say, okay, well, then we can do an extension. If they say no, then we work towards the deadline. I don't think staying not knowledgeable about that answer is helpful.
Greg, are you also asking just what's the play here between when we get the numbers and when you have to select the preferred schematic design before going into SD?
No,
We're just in one phase,
No.
right? Okay,
I'm asking if we have the potential to push off modular 5.
right. So if we go out to the community for an overriding or unsuccessful.
Later. No,
No?
we can't go and get,
Now?
if we're unsuccessful.
Now.
He's talking now,
Yeah, you mean long before?
Pushing off the November date.
the vote.
Well, again, it goes back to the bigger picture timeframe that Ben outlined. And so maybe we can put dates to things. I do believe you have a tiny bit, if you're talking about a shorter term
I'm not.
concern, there is some play there because we need to submit PSR by a certain date to be on the board meeting. And we're forward of that, ahead of that.
And they don't adjust their board meetings for us or we'll have a second one. Judging by the laughs, I would say.
I love your spirit.
Like Greg said, doesn't hurt to ask, right?
I don't think it hurts to ask. Not that they're gonna pull funding because we asked the question.
I could also do some digging without formally asking if that's
Might be.
I think the other thing to keep in mind, just how this all, we start to experience it is once you start communicating information publicly about the cost of the project, if you suddenly are adding time to that, then the costs aren't reflective of the real project anymore.
To that point, might they go down?
Uh,
Do we know? Huh?
It would be historically unlikely that there would be they may not go up at the same rate, but they
Right.
are unlikely to go down,
Okay.
just based on how.
Level,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
leveling, and maybe Steve can.
I know we're in extraordinary times, right, in terms of inflation and building
We
costs,
certainly have.
but there's not gonna be a decrease in our cost estimate based from now till a year.
There's gonna be an escalation cost there at some point, so yeah.
I mean, historically, construction costs rise, over 50 years, they rise 4% a year.
Right.
That doesn't mean 4% every year. That means
Right.
10%.
But if you go up 20, does it ever go down 10?
Mhm.
No.
I mean, it didn't go down that far in 2010.
Okay.
Right? So.
Thank you. That helps.
And I think in general, the record you'd see looking at projects that don't pass it, and that you get back online, essentially you're looking at like several years before you're back in.
Yeah, I mean, you're out with prejudice.
And
Well, it took us 10 years to get in the first time. It's not gonna be any quicker to get back. And I understand that's why I asked the question because of my concerns, obviously, that I've expressed prior. Yeah.
Right, and because the cost of things is the way it is right now, the MSBA is awarding fewer. Inviting fewer
In.
districts into the program every year.
They
That
actually
was certainly
paused-
the
paused their
subject.
accelerated
They
repair.
paused accelerated repair. They're trying to, meet people a little bit partway with the increase in costs.
And then they also increased reimbursement, right? Which means
They did.
we've got,
Yeah, talk about those.
less money for more.
Yeah, we'll talk about that
More money
later.
For less people.
Not to steal.
I'm sorry.
No, not to steal the
Exactly.
I just want to make sure we address those. That's, yeah.
Steve's exactly right. They've increased the reimbursement at this point, which I think is very helpful to the projects that are all in the queue right now. But once again, it's going to get more selective going forward is our understanding of that because they still have that same pot of money they got to deal with. So
And the second estimator is Skanska.
yes, well, it's a consultant of ours, but
Who are you using?
it's PCM, sorry.
I was gonna say,
Your PMC. We have PMC and PCM, believe it or not, just to confuse everything.
Oh, my God. Okay.
It's Kyla Magnus that we use here. A lot of projects. I can send you that. info.
When we discuss how their increase in the cap impacts the project, we'll be able to go into some detail in terms of things we should be thinking about, because it's not a direct, like you can do the simple math and that this is the percentage it went up. So, but my understanding in talking with you folks quickly is that it's more detailed than that.
That's exactly
Are we
right.
gonna talk about that further though?
We will,
That's-
yeah, it's actually.
yeah, that's my
it's
question.
built in.
I'll ask another question if not.
No,
We're gonna go.
we'll get into that. Okay, sounds like we got a little.
I was trying to help.
I know you were, but you were leading me where I wanted to go, so.
See?
But not, I'm told not yet. Sorry, go ahead.
Bridge builder.
Oh, good. All right, so we'll resume on the schedule here. So assuming a approval of the PSR by the SBC, we're then going to finalize our submittal requirements and then we submit formally to the MSBA on February 14th, which queues up their 21-day review period. They'll get us their comments after that. We go through that, respond to them. We also have a facilities assessment presentation, which once again is basically just a call with MSBA. It's informal, just kind of going through the submission, helping us include anything that, they want or anything that we're not aware of at that point, which won't be the case, but good little check-in with the state. So the MSBA board meeting for PSR approval is that April 26th date that's set in stone. So that's basically wraps up what we're looking at for PSR. And so.
Are they in person?
No,
They're not in
This
person?
next, they haven't.
they
been.
haven't been.
They haven't been this next, that one. I don't know. I haven't heard yet. I would plan on it being remote, but we might get an information about that changing
So
soon.
wear your suits.
I've heard rumblings that they're getting back into the office and all that, but it seems to be.
Ben, give me PSR again.
Sorry.
PSR. What about, refresh my memory.
Preferred schematic referred.
Preferred. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
no worries.
That was a trick
So
right there.
You got it.
He did.
So this basically, I'll just go through once again what the difference between the CMR schedule and the DBB schedule is. So ultimately, under this approach, everything, like I said, remains the same up through funding the project. We do project that the town will engage with a CM under this approach at the onset of module 6. So once funding is in place for the full project, then we look to bring on a construction manager as early in the process as we can so that we can get the best benefit out of them. And so the intent there is, through the use of early bid packages, we'll actually start the construction process sooner than we would be able to with a DBB design bid build approach. And so what we're showing here is basically the CM will be able to mobilize and begin site work in the summer of 2024. So you see in that green bar at the bottom there, construction, we're showing July 23, 2024. This is all rolled up and summarized because I didn't want to get too into the weeds, but ultimately that's what it's showing is us getting started in the summer of 2024 with the site work. And then that ultimately allows for the completion of phase one, which is the new building in the summer of 2026. So that would allow for staff and students to move into the new building, and then we could start the subsequent phase of knocking down the old building and any associated site work that would go along with that.
Question,
Sir.
if we were to decide to go the CMR route, we would have to get state approval.
Yes, yeah, you
It'll
gotta,
take some time.
yep, yeah.
Looking at the dates you have, now we're working backwards to say, if that's what we're gonna do, we need to decide by this date in order to then file with the state by this date in order to be ready to, and then in order to then handle procurement.
Yep.
To be ready to go, right? So I mean, that's probably 150 days.
Right, so I would say if it's November when we plan on bringing on a CM, we submit our application to the OIG's office in
March,
yeah, exactly.
something like that.
Or as early, yeah, exactly. As early as possible is better, but it's usually like a 2-month process, Steve, for them to get through that.
Yeah, understood. I just went through it. Again, this is all just on paper.
Yep.
Right, but if we're starting, looks like, third week of July. If we were able to, and I'm not squeezing the design team yet. But if we were able to, I mean, if the closer you could pull that to the end of school.
Right.
Right, now it just ends up being more time, 2 summers from then, when you're moving in, when you really need the time to get everything dialed up and. Terminated and punched down and functioning the way we want it to, right? Furniture in the building. That could be advantageous, right? So that'd be something to consider.
Absolutely.
On your schedule, we have 1 day to move it.
He'll never.
So that's a little, yeah, it's actually,
On that, but he ignored it.
so we actually have up in that rolled up bar, we have like
Yeah.
kind of the FF&E and all the moving of all the, your guys moving of all your stuff from the old school into here. That's shown as a 4-week period, not just 1 day. So that 1 day is really just memorializing kind of the.
You can stand up and network in a week.
I think we still did it in. I don't know.
I don't want to set the bar too high.
No.
However, we did it in a weekend.
The intent there is really that
Where you're going.
the intent there is that the construction manager will have achieved substantial completion in June of that year, so that, that subsequent move in.
Bigger items.
Yeah, the furniture, all that good stuff will be taking place right after that. We're not just starting that process in August and hopeful that you guys.
And that can be negotiable as well.
Sure. So,
Why do they require us to go through them with a CMR, but not with a design bid build? Like, what's the reasoning behind it?
that's a good question. I don't know if I know.
It makes you go, ooh, but
I'm sorry, what's the question?
She's asking why, if you're gonna use a CM, you need to go through the OIG process, as opposed to a GC. You don't need to file any formal paperwork.
Because Massachusetts, being progressive like they are,
Mm.
adopting CMR, in what, 2004.
Yeah, it all goes back to the Construction Reform Act. In
It's
that
still
though.
kind of a new thing, and they still feel like, all you little cities and
2004.
towns, you're not competent to make this decision.
It's,
We better help you.
but we're okay to hire somebody on our own without them looking.
right. But I've never seen an application, Steve, maybe you have on one of your projects, I've never seen an application be rejected.
No,
So,
it's busy work.
It's a process.
okay, so that's our CMR schedule. So if we could go on to the next one. All right, so you'll see, yep, that's it. You'll see at the top there, the chapter 149, design bid build. So like I said, everything under this methodology would remain the same up through schematic design and funding the project. Is in DD. So the big thing is that we essentially need to wait for the design documents to be at 100% before we start the bidding phase. So ultimately, you'll see here, there's like an extra couple weeks there where we wouldn't project to have a general contractor on board until December of 2024. So once that bidding is all set, we're right smack dab in the middle of winter of 2024. I would say that's not a very viable time to start construction, given all the weather conditions, and it's just not optimal. So we're showing it here. I think we're being as, what are we showing here? So we're showing February of 2025 as kind of the general contractors mobilization to the site. They would be coming in, setting up their trailers, all that early, easy work, and then starting the site work. This is somewhat optimistic, but starting site work in March of 2025.
So Ben, if I'm reading this right, so detailed design finishes mid-December.
Well, it actually, so the detailed design, if this wasn't rolled up, you'd see that the actual end date is tied to when the bidding is complete. So the documents, I believe, will be completed in November.
So that contains some procurement.
Correct. Got it. Yep. And so from there, the big difference you're gonna see is that yellow bar at the bottom there. Occupancy and move-in, if we do have to wait to go through that bidding phase and then push out the construction a bit, the building would not be ready for the staff and students until March, or let's call it the spring of 2027. This goes back to our, moving in mid-year.
It's gonna do.
Right, not the best. So I think we'd probably, if it ended up timing out like that, it might
Have to be.
look at April break if that was sufficient to move in. But ultimately, I wanted to put this together because I know we talked about it the last time that there's schedule differences. Really just had the one schedule to go off of. So this is very summarized. I thought we'd have less time today. I otherwise probably would have broke out a couple of these and explained to you where the differences are. But that's the big difference there is you definitely save some time with.
But that's my fault, not yours.
Not your fault. Things happen.
So Ben, we anticipate the cost to be less for the design build, right? Is that what we decided?
So we're still going through this. So we do want to revisit all of this at a future meeting. We intended for today to be about the PSR. But ultimately, we did take a look at it. And I know we reported back to you last time, there was a 5% number that was floating out there that was tied to CM at risk. We've since gone through some very helpful reports, and we're kind of finding that, that 5% number was kind of derived from when MSBA did a study back in, I think it was like 2012. And then there's been other studies that have come out since that have kind of shown that information is exactly accurate. We're sifting through all the information now so that we can summarize it for you folks, but we do feel as though it's actually less than 1%. It's not the 5%. So I'm hopeful to be able to give you more supportive details at the next meeting, but we just weren't fully prepared to dive into.
Irrespective of what that delta may or may not be. If you're buying the job 6 months later, which it sounds like you are,
Right.
just historically, that would be a couple of points in and of itself.
Yeah, but that's worked into your 1% already, I bet.
I'll bet it's not.
No, I don't think so.
So otherwise, it's not apples to
And
apples.
it's more, so then it costs more for the DBB?
It can end up showing up when we,
Leaving aside what the delta may be.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say it's 4%, just to pick a number. Okay, so 4%. But you're gonna spend 2 of that waiting 6 more months. And these are just, theoretical, right? Hypotheticals.
Well, but that's a 2% savings versus a 3% negative for the DBB. So I think it matters what that delta is.
It does, but you also have to appreciate that the 5% that MSBA put out there was based on award numbers. It wasn't based on finishing numbers.
That's the big difference.
That can be completely deceptive.
Doesn't include the change orders, doesn't exactly. It's not
Right.
the big cost. That's
I mean, depending on,
Yeah, but when do we fund those?
excuse me,
When do we,
you fund them as you go or else you stop.
after
Do it in life.
initial number? So our initial number is lower,
then your final, yeah.
right? So would it be lower in the design bid build or it would be more, right? The initial number,
The initial number would be more, yes.
lower.
Yes.
Right. So
Or for the DBB.
so broadly speaking,
No, lower.
Opposite.
so I'll just also
Okay,
add,
right, that's what I meant.
Yes.
Yeah.
The intent.
I'll just add that when we go to the cost estimator, Greg, we,
Help me with ideas to save money. I'm looking for substantial options to save money on this project.
I guess there's a point at which, Greg, if the project agreed to by this committee is a school of 194,000 square feet. You cannot say to this design team, I want 194,000 square feet for $40 million less. than what you're telling me it would cost. I mean, that's what I mean, like there, you have to be,
Can we shrink the project?
Well, you can.
He's asking to shrink the project.
if you want
Square
to,
footage.
yes, if you want to reduce square footage dramatically, but then you also again have an educational plan you have to meet, you have an agreement with this, you have to meet, you know, you have.
There's other things like the site work or things like that, that it could be stripped back. As long as you're not changing the overall program or the overall
Right.
project, then you are fine, but.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
You have to meet their required science lab requirements.
Can we get waivers on those things? And I know I'm overwhelming the conversation here, but I'm
No, it's fine.
on the size of the science labs and all those things, in order to meet a lower square footage threshold, can we decrease the size of those and ask for a waiver from MSBA?
We don't do
you
that.
could shrink
You don't-
hallways and
You
things
want
like
that
that.
Yep.
If you want to, I don't know, but you can't. There are state guidelines on space sizes. That's a
Right.
lot of.
My goal is a new building versus not a new building. That's really my goal. That's all it is. And that's why I'm asking these questions. It's to get the new building. I have grave concerns about it, grave concerns. So that's why, that's all
It's not
I'm
just
asking.
the size and the shape of the building, Joe. I mean, to a degree it is, it's also the material, and we're just gonna ask them to be creative with quality materials that aren't the most expensive, and I think that they're out there, and I think that's a way of helping, and there's all kinds of ways. And you know,
I don't want to discourage that line of thought, right? We should be looking at all these things, you know, very carefully.
We're looking at
Do we really need that? Do we really need this? At the same time, and I would be curious to hear design team or Ben's and John's input. You will reach a point, there are only so many things public school that you can actually affect. Because the structure is the structure. Mechanical and electrical are the mechanical and electrical. Can you play with the facade and do something less expensive? Maybe. Can you play with finishes? Maybe. But I mean, now you're to the point where it's like, are we gonna have concrete floors everywhere? Maybe we do. Right, Whole Foods does it.
I mean, does 3 floors cost less than 2 floors?
Generally not.
Necessarily,
Really?
no.
No, okay,
No, I mean, you're creating other costs.
Are you thinking smaller and taller?
You know,
yeah,
Or
both, yeah.
These finishes, that's gonna.
I mean, that's something I think we could certainly look at. I don't think it would be achieving the kind of delta that you're talking about, and it would create some other challenges, but.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a bunch of things that achieve multiple lowering the delta, yeah. Because I know we have some new things from the state, that's encouraging. We have some things that will be reimbursed, the rate's been changed. Those are small things. I think we'll gain 1% or 2 or 3 on some of those things.
they're not
If
that
we can
small.
add them all up, well, 2% is small. 2% is not where I'm feeling comfortable at, you know, so. But if we can put all these things together and really get to the crux of what basic would be acceptable to the town, I don't want to skimp on it, I'm not looking to skimp. I'm just looking for those options, and I think we need to discuss those because I know we talked about this, but have you seen a building our size at our cost or anywhere close to it in projected cost? Probably not, right?
Meaning
Roughly speaking.
less or more, what do you,
Building of our size, costing it's predicted to cost as much as ours.
oh, yes.
Yeah, all day long,
Okay.
if not more.
Yeah, we're not in some radically strange place here, you know, I mean, we're not doing something that's unusual in terms of the approach to this project. This is very much, if you looked at Amherst, you'd see that the cost for that project is significantly higher
Per
for.
square foot?
I heard 900 bucks.
Between 800 and 900. They're estimating right now, but
Remember that used to be a hospital?
It's net zero.
it's a net zero project, so it's not apples to apples here whatsoever, but yeah, we have seen other projects be much steeper.
All right, can
Senior center's eight.
I suggest we go, let's get through our materials and then I know anything that requires a deeper dive, we can do that. I think we had promised you a shorter meeting today.
I'm gonna be able to
I'm done.
do that.
And then it was gonna be a longer meeting and now, but
Order is relative, no, because we've
You're
been going about 2.5 hours, so if we get in.
Let's keep going, Ben, what else?
Again, I put that together just for comparative reasons. Money aside, this is just kind of what we're kind of expecting the difference to be schedule wise between the two approaches. So once again, we got a little bit of time here to see his point, though. We probably should have or should aim to have a preferred delivery method probably by March, start that process. So we will revisit this with you.
Just to.
For the minutes,
just-
let's
just to-
call it mid-February.
But just to summarize, the key to the questions I think you were asking is that schematic design is really where you can start to zone in on possibly significant reductions, because now you've narrowed to one design and you can really get into what is going to impact the budget.
Mhm.
Correct?
Mhm. And focus our energies and attention on selecting, selection of systems, selection of materials. Some of those things really do play out in schematic design.
And you were mentioning something about site work.
I just think you have a really robust site, there's a cap on site too, which is now 10%.
Got an increase.
Cap went up on site.
Yeah.
It went up to 10%, but still a lot of your ineligible.
You're talking about
costs are in that.
concessions, stands and basketball courts, pickleball courts.
We'll be able to filter that through too, because that's something that didn't get discussed in terms of MSBA raised two caps, square footage and on site work by 10%.
It went from 8 to 10%.
8 to 10.
Went 2%. They also, a little less significant, but they also previously they reimbursed OPM and design fees. It was 3.5% for OPM fees up to $500 a square foot. And then I think it was 10% for up to $500 a square foot. They've increased that to $550 a square foot. So that is not huge, but it is once again in the owner's favor. So we can talk to that once we get there, but.
So there's a few elements in there.
There's
an impact in a positive way.
I was
The
gonna go
grant
through
that we're
all
gonna
the
get.
details, so if you wanted to, you're welcome to.
We can
Yeah.
certainly,
And what was the prior number? It's 5 is the new number. The old one was 5.
500.
the overall, so reimbursement, construction costs, it went from $360 a square foot to $393 a square foot. Previously, though, for OPM fees and for designer fees, they capped that at only they'd only reimburse, or the eligible costs were only up to $500 a square foot. So whatever you're over that, you don't get reimbursed. Now it's $550.
So 10% on both. So we're gonna get another 3%-ish. on
All of
overall.
this happens when Skanska does the magic.
Yeah.
The 3011. It's such a complicated beast that
That's a good estimate, rough estimate, right? 3% off the new numbers.
I can share the new 3011 with you. You can play around.
we know you're really good at the math, so I would
I'm
not.
just asking questions.
you.
It's not, I don't know.
Overall.
Ellen, I'm looking for that delta. I'm just digging for it.
I see that. But I think, yeah,
Is it fair to say it might be too early to put out a number?
I think that it is.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we don't have the estimate, so.
one of the
I
estimates.
don't know exactly what it means.
You don't have the
I
estimate.
will say is
One of the
we have
records.
early conceptual estimates based off the PDP phase, which we had a 3011 at that point, which was based off the logic we had then. I ran the same numbers through the new 3011, and that was like a 3% overall difference. However, our point is, this could be changing. We don't want to give you a number. And
How much does that change from the original number?
The square footage too, with the central.
we
office.
we kept that the same. So that was just just kind of see where,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Ellen,
Yeah.
sorry, Bruce.
We'll let you see the spreadsheet. It's crazy.
You're giving them the 3011.
I think it's public. You
Yeah. You can go on the MSP website.
can pull it off if you want to.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Anyway, so does anybody have any questions about the either one of these schedules or just where we're at?
I think you heard them all.
All right.
Thank you for both.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so
Is that it?
into,
That's all you got? 3.5 points for that?
keep it under 10 minutes? No? Thanks.
But you had time because
Yes.
Jason's not here. So,
Dorian, Helen,
Moving on.
floor's yours.
Okay.
all right.
The next hour and a half. Thank you.
But just regarding a comment on the bonding, I don't think it's too early for you guys to start seeking, going out there's organizations that will help you with the bond program. I know Unibank's one of them. And I think they probably do, early projections for you for free. As business development. So,
I mean, town has consultants on board.
okay, yeah, perfect. So they should be able to help, figure out the tax rate impacts and once we give you the estimates.
That's what I'm looking for.
We gotta get the
I know.
estimates first.
That's it. Yeah. So should we go that route as well, though, to get,
We don't have an amount yet.
I know. But you're suggesting we do this, right?
End of the month, once we have the numbers, you could start that process.
We're gonna make the decision now if we're gonna do it. You're not gonna meet again.
Oh, for the,
Oh, we're gonna.
So, yeah, actually, at the end, I have a slide. Hey, so actually, we talk about schedule for some of. them.
Okay.
I think that you're,
I think we
good
have
point,
covered.
right?
Sorry.
That's right. So,
What is that?
oh, are you leaving?
No, I'm
That was-
yeah. Oh, I got him. Oh, go ahead.
And I bet the under on that one.
So,
Oh, boy.
we had expected, that there'd be a presentation tonight that was gonna take some time. So this won't be terribly complicated compared to some of my previous presentations. We want to start off, by talking a little bit about student engagement. So our staff were able to get in and, and have a wonderful time with, we met with 3 different, classes and did an engagement exercise. And we tried to kind of really get a cross section of students and get their input on the project. So I can share the minutes. In fact, we were just discussing that this has been a great school building committee because we've successfully created subcommittees that have actually been working on the outside so that we can really spend our time talking about the things that Greg's bringing up. And we haven't had to, spend too much time on the subcommittee topics, but we do have minutes from all these meetings. And those of you who'd like to really dig in, and the Ed Planning Subcommittee, the Sustainability and System Subcommittee, the Site Committee, we're thinking focus group. Well, perhaps we should make a folder so that you all can read those minutes and learn more about what's going on there. With student engagement, that's something we've been asking for, and partly we do because ultimately the school's successful if the students are excited to come to school and excited to learn. So what we heard from the takeaways, what we did in those meetings, similar to things others have seen, we shared examples, we shared the plans, we talked about the priorities in the educational plan, and we talked about their experiences in the current school, things that they're interested in, and just some of the takeaways that I think are interesting because they sometimes differ from what you hear from the building committee, frankly, or the teachers. Is that they have an interest in multiple types of spaces in the cafeteria, things that feel different. There's an understanding among students of varied needs, sort of sensory needs. So that was one question is there a way that the space can be comfortable to different types of students, different seating arrangements, et cetera. Students like spaces that are clean, modern, and they're open, where they can see, sense of transparency and ability to see in distance and not feeling cramped. A lot of it's reaction always. They're in an older school, the hallway doesn't have any real daylighting anymore. So they react to those types of things, which is understandable. But they definitely react strongly to them. Natural light and comfortable spaces. Seating, actually, interestingly, they notice things that we wouldn't have noticed right away about seating. I mentioned last time, I think, that noticing that there needs to be seating in front of the school because students spend a lot of time waiting. So there's good catches on that. So they're quite sensitive to those issues. You all have heard us talk about storage and lockers and how lockers are less popular now. Well, students here, and we've heard this in the school a lot, do need their lockers. Not everybody, but a lot of students are interested in lockers if they're large enough to support their needs. So this is helpful because we have been in the plans working on putting in a lot of lockers in the PE wing, creating space for that now. So we actually were able to make some adjustments to accommodate some points that have been raised about athletics and lockers, and then other areas for lockers around the school. Not a sort of hallway lining locker approach, but kind of clusters. Lots of students want spaces that help them feel more independent and more adult. And we see this, I think, as a result of students who are working online more, taking classes in different ways, that they're just a more independent, sort of mobile learner. So not surprising, and it's come up in the ed planning as well, that need to really respect that and provide spaces that are both secure, well supervised, but also allow for that kind of independence. So those are amongst the things that we've learned a lot about. They were very excited about outdoor learning and had some comments on the types of spaces that were interesting to them. They were critical of the idea of outdoor learning without shade because of their experiences where they have tried to use the outdoors and haven't always found it comfortable. So seating and shade are big priorities for them. I think that's largely just some of the overviews, and there were a lot of interest in being a part of the project more. Having student voice here came up, as well as their strong interest in being a part of the public communication process. So again, I think in addition to talking about, for the committee, talking about the analysis of the bond borrowing and tax issues, there's also that question about, you know, the process of establishing public bodies that are working towards communication and a successful debt exclusion vote. Next. So what we have been doing, we really did not expect to spend a lot in detail on design because we really sort of stopped right now in order to wrap up and do this cost estimating process. But the final conclusions here, those are the three options that have gone in with detailed narratives and drawings, you know, somewhat detailed, obviously, because we're doing more in SD, but the comparison of these three options with certain alternate information being requested. And we have some flexibility too on more as we go. So some items we'll be pulling out, as we talked about, like lighting, et cetera. But something specifically, we wanted to compare full packaged estimates. So for instance, we've presented these, we expect to get back. We know this reimbursement square footage change that we just talked about, the 393, that's gonna kind of be information that you'll see reflected at the next school building committee meeting. Of the options, the ad reno is not that different than what we have been reviewing and discussing. The total square footage has come down as we've worked on that, which is positive. The total for new construction has also generally come down, but we will also get a deduct version that takes out IT and LCAT and a version that takes out IT and LCAT and district offices. So those options will then show you the difference between 198, 380 for new and 187, 910. And that will, between those two elements, the MSBA and those are pretty helpful. At least we've got something helpful happening along this process that I think takes us in a good direction, but we'll see further as we go. Next slide. Again, this is the general overview of that ad reno option. You know, again, tightening up where we can. And then moving on to the next. This is just showing you, there are obviously more fleshed out plans, but what we wanted to show you here are those things that had been looked at before that are now on the side. So the pool is not going to be included in these estimates. The IT and district office and LCAT removals will be estimated. So this is all they really need because they're still working on largely on a square footage basis. They also saw our massing, so they know kind of what direction we're heading. We give them outlines on what kind of materials we're talking about. Again, you know, we can go deeper on that and make more decisions, obviously in SD, but we're generally going with sort of the package of things that you would expect typically in a public school being built today. So moving on.
Excuse me, Dora.
Yep.
Is now the time to have a little bit of a discussion about the notion of the offices being pulled out, or should we leave that till later?
Well, it would be what we have been really clear about in saying is that it's okay because at this point, you know, remember 2 meetings ago, I said, are you sure, you know, we had the district offices as a sidebar element. And the decision was, no, let's efficiently bring it in as a 2-story element. And partly we were asking if you're sure, because it affects the plan. So we're at a point where we can't change the plan except by a general assumption of exclusion of square footage. So what we have been saying is we need to know going into schematic design, whether or not that is gone. We can't continue to carry different square footage goals here in terms of the district offices. So we are hoping that your PSR decision is going to decide whether or not district offices, IT and LCAT are included in the building or not.
To that point, and to what Greg was raising earlier, right? If the reduction of that square footage represents a meaningful number, and I think we would agree that it does. Isn't that something that we want to better understand as we start to look at the estimate and understand, is it really X or is it X minus, you know, a 7 or 8 figure number?
Right. So we'll present to you those differences cost-wise so that you know, so that you can select and say, because at the end of this reporting, we're saying to the MSBA, this committee has selected the option of just hypothetically, new at the square footage goal of 187,910, because they've just opted to take some of these program goals and address them elsewhere. So that's what they're voting forward into schematic design. That allows us as a design team to then explore and detail that design further. So all those things that we added, we then sort of, start to work through as we work through the details on this plan. The plan and schematic design, just so you understand, right now, diagrammed two-dimensional plans are all that they're estimating from. In schematic design, we start to develop what look like construction documents. They're full drawings that have an outline of systems, that you have a mechanical set, a structural set, et cetera. So that's where we really start to go that direction. You start seeing it. Now, it doesn't mean even after schematic design, there's a lot of design, but we are really starting to resolve those issues. So that's the difference. We're still just presenting you information to help you make this decision. So starting.
Can I ask you a question? Or
Yes.
on the, this is Mary McNally. That PSR that's due on the 14th of February, is that the date by which you need to know the square footage number with certainty? Or is it the design submission late, which will occur later?
No, that's when we want your decision on that.
On February 14th.
Yes, because that date reflects, that's the NSBA.
That's when we're
Submittal.
submitting.
Yeah, that's our
You're
submission
telling
date.
the MSBA what your goal is, what your selection of these options and goal is. Yes.
Is that a nice to have or a have to have?
I wouldn't say that fixes you to that total square footage number permanently, because through schematic design, there might be, little bits of change, right? We might tighten the grossing, for instance, we might work to bring it down. We take out, in the grossing factor, or maybe you decide as a committee that we might find that the MSBA is not willing to support something that you have in the project, and we decide that we want to remove it. That's the kind of changes that we're expecting to be making through the SD. It is a real problem for us if we're trying to design for multiple options that include or exclude these non-reimbursable elements that we're discussing.
Yes,
So
because I'm not certain that we'll know with certainty by the 14th of February, whether I'm from the town side, if we can accommodate the inclusion of these three different departments that result in that reduction of 10,000 square feet.
Well,
And I
it
don't
would
want to,
yeah, right.
Excuse me, Mary, is that dependent on the acquisition that's floating around in the press right now?
yes. And that acquisition has tenants who have leases that will extend, so there's not that availability in the building right now, even if we close on time in February, which is my concern that, ultimately the thought was that central office could consider moving into the old town hall once some people vacate that building and move to our new building. But everything's in motion at the same time, and I'd hate to make, have people make a decision based on things that could
Sure.
change.
Well, let me clarify then how we could do it. So the MSBA is most eager to know. What I'm concerned about is how it would affect your decision making between ad reno and new. If that's not even an issue, then I'd say if you're able to select that you want to go forward with new, and this is the only thing you're still unsure about, then we can report it that way to the MSBA. We have, as I think, the next goal. I'd like to keep putting deadlines in front of you because it really helps to resolve this, frankly. But there's also a facilities assessment subcommittee meeting with the MSBA, and that will be.
Sorry, I just want to clarify one thing. We don't need to move the central office to like 2025.
No, but we're talking about what the design goals.
I understand that, yeah. but
Yeah. I'm not talking about.
I heard someone thinking that
No.
Gordon need to move
No,
right away.
no.
I'm already factory.
No, we realize that the actual move would be several years out, but nevertheless,
exactly.
those tenants' leases may extend beyond that period as well. So I that's all.
So March 29th is that facilities assessment subcommittee. That's when East Long Meadow presents their intent, then their preferred design. and what they'll be working on in schematic design. And it would be very helpful because I think you will find the MSBA is going to have questions. There's this big chunk of up in the air
Right.
square footage. So that would be another goal to put out is potentially by end of March. If there were a resolution, it would certainly help. I don't want it to impede us moving forward. And I don't think it will. We could conceivably carry it further, but really we're working in documents and it's a pretty big delta of space. You know, for
Right.
instance, we had a, elevator or not. third floor or
Agreed,
not.
it's also a big number. I mean, to Greg's point earlier, we're talking about 10,000 feet at $600, $500,
5 million.
some big number.
5 million.
This is
Yeah.
between 5 and 7.
So 2.5%, 2.5, 3, close to 3.
Yeah.
So, it's at,
Yeah.
You chip away at it, yeah.
if we can do it though, if we can't commit to it, it doesn't help us.
Right. Right.
Because you don't want to build stuff you're not gonna.
We're paying for that and this.
But I also feel like,
Double doesn't help us.
yeah, and I feel like in terms of moving central office and the special education department, even if you guys are working at, the new facility, trying to get it to fit space, I know that you're willing to work with what you have for the time being as tenants move out or whatever it is. I mean, whatever we need to do to get a more defined structure for this. I know that you'd be willing to say, yeah, I don't mind, the shoebox for a year while somebody, you know what I'm
Working out of
saying?
my car.
Yeah, I mean, we were gonna throw you where? We were gonna throw you out.
Office.
Yeah.
3 more chairs at my desk.
I think that the district is willing to
Got some tools.
do what they have to do to make this work. Because we want to be able to give these guys a more definitive.
Well, we're not gonna know, Beth, sounds like.
What if we leave it included and figure out in October that we don't need it? We come up with a plan. The town hall's gonna move to 382. The rest of us are moving to the old town hall. How does that impact our plan at that point?
To the extent that you've already selected the new option,
No,
That we select.
I'm not sure it does a lot.
Jen,
This is like.
no, you'd be asking us to redesign. You don't want to do that.
You're talking
It'd be good
October
to figure this
twenty
out.
twenty-three though. So I mean, just.
23, yeah.
As concept, and gone into DD theoretically, if something happened there.
Push your boat out.
But the downside of that, does that help you? Yes, it certainly helps you. The downside is you've gone out to the community to try and sell this project on a larger project than you actually are gonna be doing, which is just making your life harder.
so when do we need square footage number? When do we need-
When
these are being-
and it can't be today because it's not today, but
Right.
realistically, when is the number that we would love for, the town side to come back and say, all right.
But I mean, let's think about what it's subject to, right? So it's
Yeah.
subject to, do you in effect buy the property?
Right.
When do you close? What does the rent roll look like?
Mhm.
When do they start to bleed off?
Renovations for the space, there's,
Build the space out. Now, if our most aggressive schedule would be that you're occupying a new building in the fall of 26, right? The most aggressive CMR schedule. Then that would mean that, so we work backwards from there to say, okay, when this building sees a wrecking ball, then, you comfortably ensconce someplace else. And does that all make sense? Right? I mean, there's lots of things you could do, right? You can buy down the lease, but that costs money. And that defeats the purpose of we're trying to save money,
Right.
right,
trying to spend more. So I'm not sure what the answer is.
Was the question mark more around whether, Mary, is the question mark more around whether the tenants want to stay after their lease is up?
Well, those discussions will take place once the town takes title, but they have a right. I mean, they have written
Right.
leases that are valid and should be honored unless they choose. I mean, I don't intend to, on behalf of the town, to start any sort of eviction, but I certainly intend to start some conversations. I mean, there's a couple of large tenants, the Westfield Bank being one of them. I don't really see them vacating sooner than their lease is up, but some of the other larger tenants may be interested in leaving, but I don't know that, and I really hesitate to make that representation even casually. We're gonna talk about it, but we'll have to wait and see. So,
Mary, what's the vacancy look like right now?
I'm sorry,
What's the vacancy look like in the building right now? Is there any?
3,000 feet.
3,200 square feet,
Oh,
the second floor.
10,000, 3,000, almost the same.
It's numbers.
Right
Can I
now,
just add, I worry about the special ed aspect of that
Yeah,
because special ed is an extremely high traffic area of the building. And if they're gonna be somewhere for a year, it needs to be really accessible to like families. We all access this office, all the special ed teachers, the liaisons regularly. So, yes.
And now we do all the
Being
walk-
kind of in a shoebox for a year, yes. Michael can function that way.
I said
Correct.
boarding could be in the
Yes.
shoes.
Instead of all a
Well,
unit.
sorry,
Well,
because you need.
are we moving special ed?
Right.
Or we, is that
Yes.
part of central?
Go to,
Yes.
Right, it's.
and you can.
Does that make sense?
Dovetailed.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the space opens up, you can do the walk-in services, you can do all that you're talking about. But it sounds like it's the interim time that we're worried about.
Right, and I do think that if, once you make a decision one way or the other about whether or not, in the long run, it makes sense for district offices, part of this project or not. You know, we can help you to some degree with this in terms of phasing or temporary solutions, or if you have an office, you need us to help you figure out how could that temporarily work? Is there space in the project where you could temporarily be to support that? And if you have a period of time that can become part of the challenge for us.
So what month?
But I think it's
No.
long term that matters.
But didn't Dory, didn't you just say that the most important decision that this team has to make is which option do we want, 1, 2, or 3? And I think that that's not going to be a difficult decision for us. And I think I also heard you say that you guys can put in kind of a little bit of our plan and our dilemma and why we do have a challenge that perhaps we would then be able to work with the MSBA, right? Did I hear that
Exactly.
correct?
And I'm hoping you can resolve this by the end of March.
Exactly, it'll give us time.
Right.
Absolutely, that can't be done. Is there some, do we have up until you sign a scope and budget agreement really with the MSBA? That you have a number that you're then going out to the community, and that's the most important number, right? Because then you're explaining to the community.
Right.
That you've done your best to bring this project to that final point. And I strongly think that it'd be better if it happened earlier in schematic design. Can we manage if it has to come out? There's still a lot of design even after the schematic design ends, but for you all, it makes a lot of sense for that to be resolved.
So by the end of March, we need to know if the 3 departments are in or out.
It would be best.
It would be
By
best.
the 29th of March, let
No,
If that was possible, I don't know, I see Mary.
we keep pushing it off and just.
So Ben, Ben or John, the budget agreement with MSBA, that's what, early fall, late summer?
October?
What's after your vote, right?
No, it's before.
Before the vote.
Before the vote, so it's October. I don't have the date.
So it's pretty close to,
Yeah.
They'll sign an agreement.
No, I don't think that's right.
I was on.
They'll sign it before we have.
They'll, I
They'll
think.
draft. an
yeah,
agreement.
it's contingent.
Yes,
It's
yes,
contingent on the vote, but that we'll know.
it's contingent on the
We have
vote.
to have the.
Most towns don't want to vote until they know the MSBA has approved the project.
And I think that if we're being transparent to the community, having these discussions here, talking about this building and that, we all are trying to get the cost down for the taxpayers and that this is part of the conversation, it will still be transparent, even if it goes on a little longer. I see that as a good thing and still being very transparent and
Yeah.
doing the right thing.
well, and there's no magic to 382 North Main. I mean, we could always put out an RFP for rental space on a short-term basis with all the concomitant costs that go along with that, which we're not anxious to incur. But if we do decide that you want to save the money on that 10,470 feet,
Right.
there's that space available somewhere in East Long Meadow. I'm certain of it.
And I think that's what we're
And so
asking
that's another
for, that
option. I mean,
commitment.
ideally, we'd be
Yeah.
going into 382, but I don't see that happening on the timetable that we need for the school project necessarily.
And the project scope and budget agreement is based off of what we submit for schematic.
Right.
So ultimately, that submission goes in August. So I'm,
But it's estimated a
Right,
month
months.
before, so you really, you need to let us know.
I would say
By-
June would
in
be like the
March.
last, that would end it
that far.
last.
Then we-
Shows a little buffer, right?
I would like to, I'm just holding it out there.
I have a crazy thought.
Impacts us.
Would it be possible to put the central office on the second story of the pool building,
You know,
since that's all ineligible space?
I don't think we want to make that any more expensive than it's gonna be as
Hi,
a
babe.
lone vote.
And on,
Nope.
yeah,
No, okay.
total town.
And we can do different construction with,
Sounds like student support services
Yeah.
are the key. Central office is already in a shoebox, so
Uh-huh.
I got an extra chair at Tom's desk.
Don, I appreciate the thought because we're up for options, but I think that second vote, the smaller that number is, the more palatable it is.
And it'll be wicked high, because the pool's already gonna be,
Oh, the building itself, how
Right.
height wise.
Okay, just to summarize, the key decision is you need to know of the three options, what option we're heading towards
Mhm.
before PSR. We have ideally, if we were going to set a goal until March 29th, to think about where the other three departments go.
Mhm.
That's not necessarily the time frame that the town can operate on to guarantee.
Right.
However, Mary was saying that there may be other options.
Right.
If we commit to that, even if we commit to that, we as three departments don't need to move in the
Right.
next
A number of
years anyway.
That's right. That's right.
So you have a long window.
So we do have a long window to solve it, even if we commit, we may not be, right, yeah, so you could commit and still work the problem.
Right. And the
Yeah.
way that we will write the report, sorry, Greg, is to the MSBA is to say that the town is actively exploring the ability to remove X, Y, and Z square footage as you know, they're ineligible. We can write the narrative that way, so they know that
So
you're
the commitment,
working
making
on
the
it.
decision to commit, but your commitment gives you almost 3 years to make it happen. Would that be accurate?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which projects have gone ahead and removed
Numbers?
from their plans? Like district office? Yeah,
It's not,
they generally put them in the plan.
no, it's mixed. Some do,
It's
some
mixed.
often, this is not an uncommon problem. A lot of districts look at other schools that they have vacancy in, they look to other public buildings, they look to rent. I worked with North Adams while I was working on a project there. They moved district offices 3 times while we were in the middle of a school construction project. And it actually got better every time. So.
It's a charm, yeah.
I just have not an uncommon problem. When you think about it from an architectural standpoint, it's office space. It's not the most expensive square footage. And a lease or even new construction of office space is cheaper typically than these schools. So, you still own this property, there are other ways to solve it here or other locations you have. Worst case scenario, best case scenario, you find a more affordable option that's public and accessible, but I don't know for sure what those options are. But I was saying we would be willing to help you, explore things. I do that for other clients, looking at other offices to say, okay, we know your needs, will this fit you or not? I think that we can help you along the way a little bit because we're here anyway.
I have a quick question. In terms of the special education department, if the kids are actively coming in and learning and being taught and being helped, is any of that space reimbursable? I mean, I know we're obviously moving it, but I guess I'm wondering, why is it part of that space considered reimbursable? And if on, like, say, the other side where you're thinking of putting the students that maybe have a little more aggressive needs, should we think of moving a small portion, like, or can we use some of that space temporarily if we can't move the special ed department right now? Would we be able to work something like that and have it being reimbursed?
I think that's a good question and actually a really smart question. I have had projects where some of those people services programs are accepted by DESE because DESE reviews that. So
It's all,
and it is, and there is an overlap in many districts. So I think it's legit to discuss that with the MSBA further. If there are, because we have some overlap. One of the nice things about the adjacency here is you're sharing a conference room that would probably be eligible for reimbursement. Some of those people services might also cross over. So Phil and I can talk about that with the MSBA if that will make a difference to you.
Yeah, I was just in my
Any-
mind wondering, we're bringing kids in and why isn't that reimbursable when they physically need this help and we're required to give them this help?
Walk-in services for our younger kids are happening here in Surrey.
Yeah.
Use it regularly for services.
Yeah,
So even if we move the office, but we still need to feel like we might need a couple rooms, you know, just that thought, we'd use them at some point in the future anyways, but.
Well, same for our stuff. We have a student help desk. A third of the space that's available or another space identified.
Oh,
for it.
really?
Yeah.
Of course.
But are we planning on it though?
that's why I'm asking you to make this decision at a time.
I don't know that we planned on that, right?
Oh, no,
No, we had
I,
it.
Yeah, we had it.
The third? Okay.
Third, a help
not-
desk.
Oh,
I helped that.
help-
You know,
That's what I'm saying. A third is significant. That's,
It's a lot of
1,000 square feet.
IT that's assumed a part of it, but you know, half your staff, no, absolutely not, but some square footage, yeah. So that's why I'm saying the difference between knowing in March and knowing in June. Well, there's a lot of touching of land, of property here, of grossing, of elevators, et cetera. So we need to kind of be able to work that out so that we can kind of tighten and organize the plan in a way that when we go in and negotiate all these square footage reimbursements with the MSBA, we actually have answers for why we have things the way they do. And it's not something we can do, you know, the flip of the switch with.
And if we've got kids helping kids in IT fix their computers, I mean, you know, now the kids are right. Or how you word it. So,
The last room. We didn't think that was gonna be reimbursable.
I know.
If we did,
but we're gonna have to put it in the plan.
it is in the plan right now. We have.
Not if we pull out IT.
Are you keeping it? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
you wouldn't get the full 10, you'd
You
get
wouldn't, yeah.
something less.
We also have spaces like Media Center that can borrow some for some of those services that remain at the school. So I think it is true that separating out, we have to look at what needs to be here to support the school.
That's true.
Isn't
Okay.
knowing now or knowing soon
Yeah.
is important. So I think, sorry.
I'd rather work that out in SD than
Oh, I know. We just need to know now, right? Or soon is what we're saying. Yeah.
sure during SD. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
No, that was good.
Hope that's helpful.
10,000 square feet, very helpful.
Next, please. We wanted to report back on the sustainability and systems focus group. And Helen is going to talk about it, but I wanted to introduce it because we have these focus groups meeting. There's a lot you all aren't all hearing about everything. So it is important because you're ultimately representing this to understand that when we talk about sustainability, I want to mention the 4 real big drivers that are part of this process, which is a little bit different than perhaps a private project. So again, we've talked about an SBA project because of the decision made by the Patrick administration has to be certified as sustainable through either LEED or CHIPS. We're going to talk tonight about those 2 options and how we've explored them and which one happens. But that helps you to have guidelines of, it's a system of credits. We'll talk about it a little bit more, that help you to kind of think about making good decisions about sustainability throughout the building. So energy, environment, site, et cetera. We're also influenced by building codes because the building codes are constantly getting more and more strict as a way of addressing energy loss, as a way of addressing life safety. But those impact the design. And that's important to note because the building code is changing pretty rapidly right now in Massachusetts. A new stretch code and energy code are in play now. And that impacts us. So when you talk about, you know, what can we cut? And Steve says mechanical systems or mechanical systems, that's because in reality, over time, the cost of the mechanical systems has grown because of code changes.
Is Stretch itself changing or you're saying
Has changed and
we are a stretch community?
North Stretch community, I know. And the problem is really the timing, that it's changed and it's gone from being percentage-based difference between, you know, base plus, but now becoming prescriptive. So for a large size school, we have to follow one of paths, specifically a path that doesn't allow us, it constrains us. We have goals we have to meet now. And they're trying to make those goals tighter and tighter so that nobody's misrepresenting what they're doing and it's all verified and you have to prove it through models before you build and then verify the design after, which is all really, really good for energy conservation, but it's such a new code. There isn't any confidence in how this is done yet. There isn't even confidence in the requirements. So it's there's a lot going on. And I'm actually president of AIA Mass, where all the architects are going, "Ah," you know, and trying to.
Not recommend a community go stretch if they were not stretch already.
You know, it puts me in that.
Okay.
And
Ask.
beyond
Stretchers.
And you're in an unusual position because you're not historically a community. You've only just become,
Yeah.
you're not even a green community yet. I think
I
that's.
think just stretch, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So you're in a bit of a position where I would say, hey, if there's any way you delay it a little longer, maybe that would serve you. We wouldn't do anything different in terms of the priorities we have for the project, but the complexity of it right now is challenging. And we'll talk a little bit about it. And maybe I can try and show some ways that's impacting things. It's an interesting question. I'll put it there. But building codes are a huge impact on sustainability, especially in a progressive state like Massachusetts that has high climate goals. Your own local priorities are also important. You know, what does the community value and care about? So some communities post-COVID really care about air quality. So that if based on what you express as priorities in that working group and what we hear from the community, we will emphasize certain credits and certain emphasis. And then the other thing we spoke about is the incentive points from the MSBA. This is actually in flux because it's tied to the codes. So you get additional reimbursement, small amount, based on how you exceed the codes. But if the code just went up, you know, can we exceed it without it? It used to be that we could quite easily, for the 2% additional you're getting, insulate the building further. It was definitely worth it. Now we really have to look at that closely because exceeding it now is increasingly
Your
challenging.
baseline's higher.
Your baseline's higher. So those are just some factors that you need to be aware of that we're looking at. And in SD, you'll hear us talk a lot more about this as we work through these issues. And it's, I have to admit, complicated. And we have a lot of consultants involved to create these models. And we'll be reviewing a lot of this with you.
So Dory, building code's a 3-year cycle, right?
Only hypothetically. And in fact, we're just about to pass a 2018 IECC, I think, right?
So whatever comes
What I was
out.
getting to is that the governor that got sworn in this morning is very outspoken about, we need to do better. We're
Mm,
not doing enough,
mhm.
right? So if you follow that through and you say, okay, you know what, then they're going to revise the code again, and whether it's 2 years or 3 years
I think that
or
we're,
18 months,
I think that we're
it
the
could be even more stringent.
That's when we pull the. permit.
I think where the governor is speaking is that we've set great goals. We need to figure out how to meet them. We've done a bad job of actually doing that. And that's, you know, I mean, I'd say that that's going to mean we need to really sort of we set this code, stretch code is a huge change. But I think there's a lot about, you know, what is the data on what's happening? How do we actually implement some of these? So there's a lot that has to happen prior to just moving the goalposts all the time. So I think that's where there's going to be a lot of attention spent in the first year, at least, of this administration.
As opposed to your lead goal, but your energy consumption went up.
Right, or you've set the bar so high, nobody wants to be a stretch community. That's, you know, counterproductive, right? So how do we, the other thing is incentives, you know, so there has been discussion about putting more support towards renewables and things like that. So we have to remain open to keep an eye on that because it hasn't been easy. The utilities have not necessarily been as supportive of municipal renewable energy projects as we might all like. Is there going to be something that's going to change that? You know, there's been a lot of promises, but we're having to keep an eye on that as well. Anyway, the committee met and talked about some of these requirements, talked also about their priorities and things that mattered based on looking at some of these credit systems and some of the overall. And talked a little bit about systems, which we're going to talk about as well, and then talked about the lead and CHIPS certification systems.
Right,
Pass it off to Helen.
which we do need a vote from you all on. So, but not to cut to the chase too quickly. So in addition to requirements, you can go ahead. So we have had 2 meetings of the systems, we're calling it Systems and Sustainability or vice versa focus group. A few of you were there for both meetings. I know Greg and Ryan were late adopters, came in for the second meeting. And in those meetings, we did talk about what Dory laid out, the code change, the requirement by the MSBA that we choose one of the green building rating systems. But let's talk about opportunities for a second. I mean, green design is actually just makes good common sense. We're talking about robust envelope, systems that are, easy to operate and maintain. Building as a learning opportunity. There are just countless ways, the sustainability beyond the systems, right? Because right now we are really focused mainly, and not even systems, mechanical system, because it's such a big decision. So as we, again, go further into especially schematic design, I think we will do a bigger, green charrette is what we're calling it. And engage students, engage more of the community and hearing more about those priorities. So again, it's beyond just meeting the requirements of the grant and choosing a rating system, but what goes into that is a great deal of opportunity for optimizing the envelope and having, sites that are sustainable and regenerative, and great learning opportunities for students. That one photo shows, being able to see in real time energy use, in a building. So we see that done very often in our projects. So you can move to the next, Gordon. And so at that last meeting that we had, I think it was the 8th of December, we put a prompt out there after kind of walking through some of the different categories and ways that one of the green building systems or both really force you to think about, site and energy. And these were, and it's probably hard to read, but some of the responses we got from group, obviously energy efficiency was important. Hearing from one of the teachers about natural light and less noisy mechanicals. Again, a lot of focus on efficiency and ease of maintenance. I like the one at the bottom, thinking about rain gardens and pollinator habitats and stormwater, and thinking about the site, not just the building. This is for the whole project. You can go ahead, Gordon.
Ellen, how many schools do you out of the gate?
None that I'm aware of. It's extremely prohibitive, unless district or a town can do a PPA with a provider. If you're seeing the
I
same.
don't want to contradict you, but we did it at Taconic and Wacona High School.
Yeah,
Right out of the gate.
yeah, a lot of it is about the municipal, kind of
Mhm.
direction on that. The project has to be PV ready. So,
Oh, it has to be.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, good.
So that's great, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and we were already doing that anyway, but it's great that, I think it's implemented that way. So it's all the infrastructure.
How does
there.
MSBA define that?
It's the code that's defining that, not the MSBA.
So what's PV ready? You've got roof space you could allocate.
Well, it's a good question. It's a little bit vague, to be honest, but for us, what that means is, the electrical rooms are sized, the location for the shut off is determined and positioned, the conduits there, the roof can support the PV.
Yeah, that's
That's about it. And then,
Amherst was net zero. Did you
That's what they're striving for.
really? And so they all include it then.
Yeah, I think they have geothermal too.
Yeah, they're doing
Geothermal, they may need it.
Cool.
yeah,
That's why it's 900.
that's why it's,
One. Or both.
yeah.
So in terms of systems, and Lana was going to be on the line, but she was not available. So in terms of what we've looked at in PDP and in PSR for costing and just keeping in the mix, kind of like your 3 options for, which direction you'd like to go. Because of the code and the stretch code, we have been focusing quite a bit on all electric systems. So we're looking at 2, air source and geothermal, ground source, and then sort of compare and contrasting that with a conventional HVAC system that relies on fossil fuels and gas-fired boilers. And so when we distribute those minutes, you'll see a lot more content about, what components go into each. But in terms of pricing and consideration, these are the 3 that we have still in the mix. And what we're calling the basis of design as the presumed direction we're recommending at this point. We are talking about air source VRF heat pumps as the basis. And if you go to the next, I think Dory can explain a little bit of the logic about why we're calling that the basis of design at this point.
So we carried this in TDP as a basis of design. I would think 5 years ago, a conventional system and an air source heat pump system, you would have seen that the air source heat pump system would be more efficient overall, but more costly. And we do ultimately in SD, we'll do a detailed life cycle analysis looking at maintenance and durability and long-term costs and upfront costs. So you're kind of comparing it not just to first cost, but also in a sense, last cost. But over time, and because of the code change, what we're finding is that conventional system is no longer the cheaper system. So the code has made it more complicated, partly because of this goal to eliminate fossil fuel use. So we're just talking about heating and cooling at the moment. So seeing the writing on the wall, we carried as basis of design in PDP, the air source heat pump approach, and asked for information about ground source heat pump to see what the delta was. And we're going to do the same thing in this review. So the ground source is alt one of our 4 alt pricing issues. In general, I thought it would be helpful for you guys to know just what we see as kind of the rough big picture differences between these systems. So air source heat pumps are more energy efficient. You're using the refrigerant to deliver heating and cooling essentially rather than water or air. So the refrigerant is itself more efficient, which is why you're finding these have improved a lot over the last 15 years and why they're now so heavily what everybody's looking to. They have challenges, but they are more efficient. So that's why they're the preferred method. They are all electric, so you're eliminating fossil fuel use for heating in the building. They're decentralized, meaning that you're going to end up with more units. It could be that you're ganging classrooms to a unit, or you might imagine in a housing project, everybody has their own unit, right? So having more units means that you don't have the redundancy you have currently of a boiler and a backup boiler and a big tank of oil that you actually haven't touched. So that redundancy is a concern with these systems. On the other hand, the flip side is one system goes down, you're replacing that system, the whole school isn't down. So there's kind of a cost benefit challenge there. The also, the air source heat pump system easily meets the stretch code requirements for the mechanical systems, whereas the conventional system, they're trying to kind of find ways to make it harder and harder. It can be done, but there's just more hoops. Now the requirement is that you have the infrastructure ready to go all electric. You plan ahead. So in a sense, that's where the penalty is that had made the difference between the costs go a different direction. So based on previous recent analyses, we find that the air source heat pump is the best overall. And it's what we're assuming, but we are pricing so that we can kind of look at that with you and continue that conversation if we need to further in schematic design. But
I'm sorry, Doris, you're pricing obviously the air source.
Right.
So
the
And getting
deduct
the-
all for the conventional as well as the add.
It won't be a deduct. It's actually in
Well, we don't want
PDP.
added.
It was,
it's going to be an ad.
it was an ad.
Probably an ad. It's
Right.
listed as, let's see what the number is. but-
Yeah, so we'll get that.
Dory, I found
Data.
interesting the number of wells estimated.
No, I don't.
How many wells were it?
Oh,
80 or something.
100 and something.
Yeah.
That we'd have to dig.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wells.
Lana did an analysis.
Yeah.
Amazing, yeah.
And there is it's interesting,
It's not-
ground sources. When I first moved to Massachusetts, that was a really hot thing for a little while, and then it died, and now it's back, and partly what's changed is the efficiency of the refrigerant loops have gotten better. So that's why it's back again, but there's still some of the default concerns about ground source remain, that your soil conditions you have to verify. And you still have the system that the rest of the system you're dependent on. The efficiency of ground source comes from the fact that the ground temperature is more consistent. So compared to air source in mid-February, when you're dealing with low temperatures, you just get a more consistent base. But to get that, you have to create, a huge system of wells, and getting that done is where that upfront cost is. So the payback on ground source continues to be extremely long. The reason why we're still even talking about it, frankly, is that, again, as I said, public policy is looking at incentivizing this theoretically. If magically in the next 6 months, somebody makes it more logical to do that, then, you know, we would want to entertain it. This has not been a community where we've imagined you wanted to do what Amherst is doing.
I think we would love to do what Amherst is doing. I don't think we can afford it.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I'm impressed that they're able to do it because that's where we should be.
Right, it should be.
They're able to aim for it. They haven't actually passed their
Oh.
override.
The only other thing with the ground.
Ah.
The long-term savings moving forward, say the life of the building, you hope is over 60 years old, 60 years, as the cost of energy increases, is that gonna pay for itself 10 times over moving forward, or is it just gonna be an albatross? You know what I mean? Cause I'd like to see it done. I know that that's like asking for.
Is there a way to do a hybrid? I should have asked in the focus.
There is, yeah.
Have X amount of condensers or outdoor units go ground source like the high demand
There are
ones.
multiple variations on any one of these,
Yeah.
these options. And again, I think we're gonna dig more deeply. I know that Lana wants to meet with
No pun intended. I was just.
on the building management system and have more discussion. But certainly, yes, we've looked at a recent project. We actually did the LCCA decoder life cycle cost analysis on 3 systems, which the MSBA requires us to do at schematic design. And we looked at 3 all-electric systems, including the ground source, air source, and then some kind of hybrid. The problem with the ground source is the payback and the initial cost of millions of dollars,
Yeah,
that the payback ends up being 50 to 60 years, whereas an air source system is like 5 to 6 years.
if you had like a hybrid where, you know,
Yeah.
on those really cold days when that efficiency curve drops right off,
Mhm.
if it pulls from the ground source, I don't know.
But you'd have to protect all the individual in the units. Right?
To do a little ground source, you know, because
Yeah,
and the cost of investing in the wells is so high, but
you
we,
gotta do like a quarter of the wells, but
right,
for the mechanical systems, can't accommodate having air source and ground source switching.
that I don't know, Lana could,
Yeah.
I mean, the head end doesn't know the difference,
I
right?
don't think.
It's, it's just a matter of refrigerant flowing around.
Yeah.
So they don't know how it's getting cooled.
Right, well, because you got the outdoor units, which, you know, with heat pump doesn't cool, it just moves heat in either
Right.
direction. Where if you had on the cold days, it was pulling from the ground to pull the heat out of the ground to bring inside instead of trying to pull the heat out of the 10-degree air. Then it would be a lot more efficient.
I think the way they solved the cold day problem is they put electric reheats on the,
Now with the Mitsubishi Hyperheats, actually condensers are just a lot larger, so they have a lot more surface area, so they can pull more heat out of the air. They used to have those in the older heat pumps.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also a function of what temperature you can get your refrigerant to,
Right,
right? Because if you can bring that even lower, it's following the heat, right? I mean, it's, you know, it's just how it goes.
I know that, you know, Birchland's kind of our emergency area for the town, but when I think of the conventional system, you sit in the back of your head, okay, you can handle the electrification of the place, keep it heated with the fossil fuels and have a generator that's run off probably the fossil fuels. It's all coming in through a pipe. Now, if we all 100% electric
Mhm.
and the poo hits the ground, what happens is to the school.
Well,
And-
right, I think that's a great question to raise, because one of the things I would say is I'm a little more conservative and stuff in that I think the fact that you have a natural gas connection is a valuable asset that you don't want to mess up. So you're gonna have a generator here. The generators on these schools are getting larger and larger because you're so much more dependent on electricity.
Yeah.
That's natural gas fired. You know, there are other things that have historically been debatable points like hot water, domestic hot water, you know, should that be gas? Again, the code is sort of saying no in the stretch code, but the rest of the code doesn't care that much. So there's my point being that you do have natural gas here, and as a part of supporting the schools, you know, I don't think we want to pull that entirely away necessarily, because it is helpful to keep that redundancy.
Okay.
You'll notice underground source heat pump that because the wells can be, changing over time, there's also a required redundancy there of an auxiliary boiler in case
Right.
of
Yeah.
finished well performance. Which is
Trailer.
part of why that cost is higher. and
Exactly.
That's a
added to the
requirement
cost.
of those systems.
Yeah.
Sorry, these
Now
are
you're buying one.
monster generator, a monster generator, right?
Yeah,
Is it like a tractor trailer size? So is that what we're talking to power this building?
Depends, you gotta calculate.
yes. Don, you got the
Depends
feedback?
on,
Yeah,
yeah,
like Ben said, maybe the size of the inside of the.
Oh, yeah?
It sits on, yeah, it sits on a curb like this.
Maybe twice what they.
Depends on what you put on it. You're not gonna put every light on it,
No,
every,
put it-
everything on
But if we're
Depends.
putting the heating on it, that's gotta be.
it.
putting on,
Right, emergency lighting,
Refrigerator in the kitchen.
Okay.
Kind of,
Right.
we go, and that's
Vacuum.
a part of the design process.
Right.
Talking about what systems have to be on there. It changed
Pipes don't.
the level of insulation required for these buildings. Because we're not doing a secondary loop. The level of insulation at the envelope is so much higher. You're not losing heat really quickly when the power goes out.
Yeah.
Compared to this current building.
Power's on, we're losing heat.
Huh?
Power's on. we're losing heat.
so more to come on this. But yep, go ahead. And so we brings us to the vote. So we did review both of the green building systems that are available to this project via the MSBA's requirement. And, very much so they're looking at the same end result, right? Which is for us all to be thinking about sustainability and following best practices. But I think, after a bit of discussion at both meetings and on some advice from both your OPM and design team, familiarity with LEED, I'd say sort of contractor familiarity with LEED. Plus, I think the main differentiator is the amount of work that you all as a town, as a district would have to do to document. And there is still going to be work for you, which I just want to be clear about that, but there are certain requirements that, the owner has to take care of. And there's significantly more with the CHIPS, which is the Collaborative for High Performance Schools program. And so with that, the focus group did concur that it made the most sense to pursue a LEED certification for this project. And we need to formally have this group ratify that.
I think that just people in general, like throughout the town, know what a LEED certified building is. I don't know how many have heard of the CHIPS. So does one cost more than the other?
They're about the same with respect to registration costs and then how, what you end up.
Manpower needed for chips.
CHIPS.
Yeah.
And does it lead to a difference in energy efficiency?
No, they're very similar in that.
At least.
They're all going
Yeah.
for the right idea.
I move that we go with the lead. Program.
Yeah. Helen remind me, is it certified or certifiable?
Pretty good.
Certified. So, yeah.
I should have let the Bruce. You want to do it again?
No, I'm good.
Catch that.
It's not-
Let's try to move things along. You guys are talking way too.
A motion on the floor without.
Oh, there was a couple seconds.
And then a couple seconds.
Okay.
I think Greg motioned to go with the LEED program and
Had to be.
Mr. Quimby. Mr. Quimby second.
Wonder when he'd show up.
Any further discussion? You sure? Okay.
If we can, Gordon.
We'll call vote. Mr. Crucial. Okay, I'm a yes. Ms. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Page?
Yes.
All right, welcome. Brown's absent. Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. McNally? However? Name's there.
Cameras up.
No, I was just muted for a minute. Yes.
Okay, great. Ms. Martin Boucher?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Penny?
Yes.
Ms. LeVar?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Quimby?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
All right. Ayes have it. I'm assuming we have no nays. Any abstentions? That passes.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yes.
Sure.
Do we have projects go chips?
Yes.
People just want to do more work.
Sounds bad when you say it that
Little
way.
bit of when you get tired of working with one bureaucracy, you think maybe one better. So
Devil you don't
JWA
know.
has done more chips and SMA's done more lead. We did lead, but we thought, well, chips is a smaller, slightly more aggressive group that may answer our calls. So let's try them for a little while, but there's not a heck of a lot of difference. They have their advantages and disadvantages. So
You find larger communities that are doing the chips versus the lead?
no,
Does it
honestly,
make a difference based on size of the building, just based on the communities?
where we see the difference is that chips, their approach to the requirements is a little bit more focused on some aspects of the educational experience. So, they care a lot about daylighting. So getting some of those credits is harder with chips, but if it's a district that really, really kind of cares about certain things, then we'll say, well, maybe chips makes sense. LEED is generically better known and its approach to energy is super well done and well known. So, and that's the thing right now that I think most districts are being driven by because they want lower operating costs, greater efficiency. So
Thank you.
Chips have levels like LEED does?
Yes.
And is their basic level the same as their silver,
yeah, they kind of.
now that we voted on it?
They're pretty
Yeah, they're very
similar.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The latter, yeah.
And the MSBA, allows both because they communicate with these entities to be sure that they have a comparable thing. So there's no advantage from the MSBA standpoint to either specific.
Lead it is. Into new business.
New business. New business to the floor.
One item would be,
He went right by it. I don't know if you want
which,
to
do
go over
you want me to
there.
go back?
No. Did you have a prompt for the new business? No, that's okay.
Oh,
That's
no,
the
no. There's-
scorecard.
At the very end, there's just.
Yeah.
This look ahead, just to prompt that question about where we are and some of which Ben covered, right? So we're about to do that reconciliation. We had been talking about a February 8th school building committee. I don't know if that was a firm date, so we want to confirm that, but you do have to vote to approve the PSR package. So prior to that, so we'll have the numbers by the 20th. And the question is, when do we review that with you, review the matrix?
So we
Your
need one
choice,
before the
yeah.
8th.
Well, the 8th could be that point, all that happened in one meeting.
And approve it in one.
Or do you want an SLT meeting and then,
You're gonna want
should we-
2 SPC meetings.
Because we may have changes. That's the time to change, right?
No, the time it changes the schematic design.
no. What do you mean, time to change?
I don't know.
Something.
Addresses? I don't know.
It's hammer, yeah. One hammer.
179 Maple.
There's space there.
At a point on February 2nd.
Second, to bring things forth.
Yeah.
I think so.
Because we'll be reconciled on the 20th.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think we'll be presenting. So long as you guys don't mind back-to-back weeks of SBC meetings, I think that's probably,
Would be the first or second.
sorry, I'm not. looking
Yeah, I
at
need
the
to
data.
look at them.
Do that before I'm throwing out.
Thursday.
So that would be the second.
Yeah,
Second.
second's a Thursday, which seem to have
The
been
eighth of first,
meetings on Thursdays.
It is a Wednesday.
Yeah.
The 9th is, the 9th.
Yeah.
is the
We want to move it to the 9th?
I mean on Thursday.
Yeah, we just kind of
Doesn't
want
matter to
to
us,
do
but-
Thursday, I guess.
Thursday. Whatever works
Yeah.
for you all.
So the second and the ninth then?
At Sir again,
Work,
4 PM.
4 PM on the
Yeah.
2nd.
And then
And the ninth.
9th will be the formal vote by the committee to
Try to bring Eric in.
how about submit to MSB.
Oh, yeah.
For that, or we can.
Can we do that?
Sooner.
Does that work?
Would sooner help.
Well, you want the whole school building committee, I think, to hear it. So we have 2 meetings, 2nd and the 9th. 2nd and 9th work for everybody?
Yes.
So we have one on the 20th, January.
No, 20th is just
Oh,
stuff coming in.
okay, gotcha.
that reconciliation.
Even if,
You don't want, you don't want to be.
reconciliation.
I'll be cheer.
He's invited.
Second.
So the two school building committees that are being proposed, meetings are being proposed are the February 2nd and February 9th. Look at the screen.
Will we have access to the reconciliation for the second? Are we gonna, we can look at it?
We'll get
Absolutely.
that out to you.
Yeah, okay.
As soon as it's reconciled, it should
Thank you. Yep.
go out within
And
a
we'll
day.
put it also, you'll see the details as well as we'll create a summary like we did before of breakdown of
Okay.
options.
Great. Thank you.
So on the 9th is when we're gonna actually vote,
Yes.
right? Which is, you have to have it to MSBA, you said by the 13th?
This one we're gonna.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And they require two.
Now, is that, that's.
Until.
That's not.
You're gonna do,
That's correct. They're submitting that.
what do we want to do that?
You have to confirm the.
I don't know.
For the minutes,
Yeah.
you have about the minutes, yeah.
Do that thing again where you adjourn the.
Could be in 2 minutes.
Yeah, because you could use two to, but I guess if you're only making that decision on the second one,
Only,
that's all.
and they're not gonna, I don't think they'll be
So
ready.
let's look at that, but yeah, no, I don't think we need to break it up.
Can you check on his availability now by chance?
I can, I was about to kind of pull the group. Would it be help? So the whole reason behind bringing in Eric Mason to speak to the group, and I know a couple of you, I've met him previously, would just be to give his experience on both dealing with MSBA, dealing with bonding, how all this stuff works, because they've been through it quite a few times, pretty successfully.
With the community.
And how you set up the community. So would there be value in doing that sooner than, what do we just say, the second?
2nd and the 9th.
Right, 2nd and the 9th, would there be value in doing that ahead of the reconciliation, immediately following the reconciliation? I mean, I would think once the committee is getting those documents, and that's gonna be a lot to digest, right? It's not just the bottom line, it's a lot of stuff.
That's, I don't know.
Would it be instructive for anyone to do that sooner than later, so that by the time you do get to a vote, you're a little bit more comfortable with just understanding how all this plays out? And
January
that's a
19th.
question to the team. Helen's nodding her head.
I'm thinking that there's going to be enough content on February 2nd where
I
you
agree.
digested the cost estimates and
Concur.
there'll be some discussion and then maybe we'll be able to look at the matrix and get closer to a vote. I'm just wondering if
Maybe
that needs to
dedicate
be a separate,
one meeting.
yet
just-
another separate meeting for Eric. Hearing someone's experience, I think would be helpful to you all because it's a scary journey.
I mean
He's
coincidentally,
done it 4 times.
so the city of Quincy and East Long Meadow happen to share the same financial advisor and the same bond counsel.
Oh,
There is some,
Yeah.
synergy there between, look, I mean, he could sit here and tell you, I'm not gonna try to do it, but he could say, here's what bond counsel's gonna tell. you.
right.
We'll have- we
If
spend
I
$50
could,
million every 6 months.
No,
Does it,
East Long Meadow probably hasn't done
Mary.
$1 million in
Mary.
quite some time.
you know,
excuse me.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
A new.
We don't have a finance officer at the moment. And the person that we have hired is going to start on February 1st. So in light of the fact that all 18 departments are going to be submitting their budgets, probably in the afternoon of February 1st. I don't want to overload this person and have her quit on the second day. So I think she would benefit greatly from hearing the presentation. And she has bonding experience in her prior employment. I just, if it's not a big imposition, I'd rather defer his presentation, at least from my perspective on the town side, since I think we'll be kind of driving this bus when the time comes. We're gonna need her to be comfortable. And
100%, this will be her show. Right?
so I'd like an opportunity. I mean, she knows that there's a school building question looming. But I'd like to give her the opportunity to get at least situated maybe for a week or 10 days before she becomes immersed in
So
this.
alternatively, if this was purely informational, recognizing that she's not starting until the 1st or the 2nd that you just said, I mean, would it be possible for her to either Zoom in? Or, I mean, the meetings are relatively late. I mean, could she invest an hour in just coming out to participate in the meeting, even though she's not formally employed yet? Is that an
Well,
option?
She's formerly employed elsewhere, so I don't know until that date. So I don't know of her availability. I'm sure she'd make herself available if that were possible, but I don't really know the answer to that.
5 o'clock. Let's
But-
set it,
But we can,
she can do it.
yeah, I mean,
She can, she can.
it's worth asking, I think.
I can reach out to her tonight.
And everything's recorded too, right?
Yeah.
So she can always go back if.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed.
I mean, I'd love to have her here live.
An elementary.
I mean, if at all possible.
What date are you thinking of?
I-
So she's from.
And I mean, we can be flexible, right? If we,
January.
Now, in our last meeting, you guys had discussed the possibility of a January 24th conversation, because that I recall, Mr. Page said was the day that a lot of counselors were available at the time. Not that it needed to be formalized, but
26, I mean.
they're also a group that benefits.
Oh, yeah, we have that. Talked about that, right?
Yeah.
In my calendar already, so.
Right, and I asked if it had been formalized.
Mr. Page here, I was thinking, Mr. Page on screen, I apologize.
No, pick whatever date you want. I mean, this is just an issue I wanted you to be aware of, that the person that's going to be really in charge of this process from the town is not here yet. So, yeah, if we could coordinate the process somehow, that would be helpful.
But do we need?
so why don't we start from what's best for us? And then we can ask this person if they can, you know, possibly accommodate it. And if they can't, maybe we change plans, or maybe we stay the course and we catch them after the fact. I mean, I would love to have her here.
Right.
I think that would be a key aspect of this whole thing.
What would be the issue of delaying her, that person coming in from Quincy just at a later date? Because we have a lot of heavy lifting on February 2nd, the 9th, and just, I mean, does it?
I actually kind of think that the 9th, you know, if you digest a lot on the 2nd, I don't know that there's gonna, I mean, the 9th, you could spend the first half of that meeting, you know, with that presentation, and then the second half with the vote.
I'm just trying to.
But if we're gonna get some numbers, in order to make the numbers relative to our decision,
Right.
I think we need the input.
That's
from
why you're
him
looking
right
prior,
Right.
otherwise we won't know what we're talking about.
So we have a meeting on the.
To Mary's point, that first week of her employment is likely to be pretty heavy.
No, I'm with you on earlier. That's what I'm saying. I think we need to have it before the 9th
Yeah.
myself.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you're thinking,
Because I sat with them and we spent probably over an hour with them.
Yeah.
It was very helpful and I think it will enlighten a lot of us in
Yeah.
terms of what it actually might mean to the voter in East Long Meadow. So
Yeah, I just.
I don't know what the answer is, but
I
Makes sense to reach out to her, see if she's interested in it,
could do that.
you know?
so what do we think a preliminary target? Could the target be the 19th? I mean, if we're gonna ask her a question, we gotta be able to tell her a date.
January
Like,
19th.
I'd prefer that.
Open-ended stuff. Time is town hall closed,
anyone? Bueller? What do you think, Kathy Hill?
like officially 4 o'clock. Yeah,
You're saying January 19th?
at maybe at 5 o'clock, would that give her a little bit of option if she's got to work till 4?
Yeah, whatever makes the most sense.
Throw that out there.
Do we have the numbers on the 20th? Oh, we're talking about.
They get over there, you're gonna sit there.
Right.
I mean, the chatter over here was just encouraging the town council to also be invited. That's all, just because.
Yeah.
A meeting, yeah.
Do it once.
I don't think it's a joint meeting. I think what you're looking for is have town council present.
Yeah.
yeah, if possible.
That would be great if we could, Ralph.
Yeah.
As long as we're not doing any deliberation.
Right,
It doesn't have to actually be.
I got one over.
right.
They're just more of the public.
You just don't talk.
Perfect.
Certain number of-
Do it that way.
Right.
Just.
So do I.
I would personally post it.
Oh, yeah, you could. Post it, right? Yeah, you're right.
I think you're right.
Their last fiscal 3.
Then you're safe.
And if, because one thing to say, well, we don't talk, but then something is compelling come up. We don't operate.
Oh, you're right, Kathy. Yeah, you're right. I agree. Yeah.
Was
And
the
just
date of
think
the
about it.
24th good for the council for a reason, and is it still?
Because we typically meet on
Yeah, January.
Tuesday.
together.
January, I'm not here on the twenty-fourth.
Oh, okay, well then, that's out.
How about the 19th?
19th, you here?
I am here on the nineteenth.
The ninth.
And then after construction.
19th work for everybody else? Is that what we're going for? 5?
But I think it's a good idea. I think if
Yeah.
it makes it easier,
8 o'clock.
Yeah,
It
in
makes it-
case she can come, maybe if she's.
if she's not able, then maybe we can pull it up a little bit or not. I mean, depending what.
I think you're right. If it's not, then we'll go back to.
Okay. Well, I have to post it, so I just need.
I know, but we're gonna get an answer and then we'll know. And then you can just make the decision.
Yeah, get the answer and then I'll dial him in and
Okay,
go from there.
so 19th possibly at, just recapping, 19th at 5, February 2nd
There,
at 4,
comforting. Yeah.
and February 9th at 4. Those are the 3 meetings we're looking at.
bang, bang, bang.
Since it's Groundhog Day, maybe February 3rd.
We could revisit it.
Visit it again.
I will check with them, but I'll let Tom talk to.
Some of our
The
meetings
new
do
candidate
feel like
first.
Groundhog Day. This one, not so much. We're moving forward. Feel it.
And Ryan brought up a good point before too, probably not for the 19th, but either the 2nd or the 9th, we'll have a vote to replace Mr. Lonigan on this committee.
Yes.
Oh, for the new finance director.
Yeah. That's MSBA.
Does the school committee have to vote on that first?
Right, Ben?
Oh,
I
yeah,
think the school committee does have some.
Got to vote on it.
that first.
Other member.
Technically you don't, but that's what
Oh, okay.
that's what we've been doing. But technically, I don't think you do, but I would stay with our practice and stay consistent.
When's our meeting before that?
So
Monday.
we have a meeting on that Monday, I believe. We don't have a meeting. Yeah, we'll have a meeting before the 2nd. Okay, absolutely.
Right.
But she's not gonna be on staff for the
Yeah,
first.
That might be.
Are we on the 6th,
Or is that?
February 6th?
February 6th.
I would-
Yes.
School district.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we are.
With them.
Put it on the agenda.
Meetings are.
Your business.
I just hope I get an email.
Where to pull that off.
You're losing them, Dory.
No, I know.
With you, Dory. Got me, Dory. I'm with you.
He's like,
That's impressive.
So one
Yeah.
is back to this conversation, the conversation about PV.
Program, that kind of stuff.
Is, I actually think kind of something tricky because the odds are, we're gonna get to a building that has greater and greater electricity demand. And photovoltaics are a smart thing to do. I don't know where the community is relative to municipal purchasing of that, but it's something to have conversations about. So if there's somebody you want me to speak to about this, I just think it's one of the things that's starting the process now of figuring out what that might look like. And how it might be, keeping your eye open for incentive programs to support that. There will be more and more of them, I think. But it's something that really has to be kind of a town rather than the school committee.
You're talking after the project's completed?
Yes, you could be, I'm
No,
curious
the
about your experience in
yeah.
Wacona. You could include, we can get the number of what it costs, but often it's sort of the building project is what it is. And because MSB is not supporting you on it and the PV might be right afterwards, it might be at the same time. That's kind of you do have some choice on that. If there's any advantage to including it, we could. Often because it's through separate incentives, there's not really any advantage to including, but in Wacona, I don't know.
We bought it with the electrician.
Let it out. And
Yes, same with the county.
that if
You just own it outright,
often
John, right? You own it?
Yeah, we bought it in the scope, yeah, so it was part of the final submit. I think we got into Eversource's incentive program, so that probably, we got benefit from that.
Yeah.
Right.
There are third-party deals to be had.
Right.
Because I'm doing a municipal project right now where we've partnered with a group called Solect. And basically, they're a middleman, but they contribute all the parts and smarts. And then basically they're just taking a small cut of what you would otherwise save.
Another reason to bring it up is that it could be in the CMR option that you end up with some money on the table at the end that could then support the photovoltaics, so that's part of why I think it's worth talking about now, if it's
What's a rough
a
estimate?
strong goal.
Rough.
Size it. Never mind that. I think it's a great idea and I think the community will
Really?
benefit more by purchasing it outright, not having that middleman. I know typically, when you have a middleman, there's no upfront cost to the town because they're receiving a portion of that energy or that cut before it goes back into the grid or having a green meter and making it go backwards. But I think it'd be advantageous of us to look at that and see if we can
We'll do a.
somewhere, at least have an estimate and keep it in our back pocket.
And you could compare them and just see what makes sense.
Yeah, and then like you said too, and I know we keep talking about engaging the students. This is one of those instances we can engage the students. I know me and Gordon been going back and forth with this company for Meadowbrook School. Is to get the kids involved at an earlier stage with some of these energy efficiency programs, and never mind that, all the LIDs, BMPs and stormwater management, because all these things are gonna be part of everybody's life in the future. So
Right, right.
Yeah.
How does,
it's a great idea.
how does it work? Like, you know, if you, I hear, because I don't know, you put them on your home and you basically, if the electricity goes off, it still goes to the company and you don't have electricity in your home. If you own it, do you have the option? I know that necessarily doesn't work either, but do you have the option of having the battery sources on?
Well, that's depending on what type of system you want. If you want battery storage for if the power does go out, that's a whole different system. So, well, it's not a different system, but it works in conjunction with everything.
But that seems to be. the-
I don't think we would do battery storage because that's huge. That's a big,
There's big incentives for it.
Be worth looking at.
Well, it's all about.
I've worked on emergency lighting systems where we have these batteries. If they're not maintained, you have, it's there's just another big, so that's something discussed down the road, but I think
But the
idea.
experience is important.
Right.
And as you're making the decision,
Right.
knowing the experience.
We can do the analysis of roughly what percentage of the roof is available, what the size of the array is and what the cost is, so that we
Yeah.
have that number in front of us, just of a starting point and helpful. And I think it's just good to keep it in sight.
Yeah.
Also to recognize. that it-
MSBA
So in design as well, though, in terms of the students, it would be worth the students being able to see it once we create it. So in our design, I know the building will face north. It's not gonna really work out, but we are lower than the road. So just as we're thinking about it,
Mhm.
in the design, it should be visible on the approach somehow, I think, if possible. Because if we want the students to appreciate it, they gotta be able to see it.
It's more of the interactive portion of it, watching it on a screen at a computer screen. Oh, it's cloudy out. We're only making, I don't know, so much.
I don't know, just a thought.
You'll be
Fuel cells.
Okay.
It's not going up and touching and touching.
Yeah, no, just acknowledging it there. You put it on a roof, you know, say, we send a couple kids up there. Check out the system.
One more item of business. That was a good one.
That was a red herring, Dory.
No, but um, The second item is actually unfortunately for you and the guy who was in the shop. Oh, he's back. Frank, we need to.
The other Mr. Page, the on-screen Mr. Page.
Yes, we have to revisit that ed plan and we have quite a few edits based on the PSR comments. So that's one thing we have to do is
Part of my New Year's
revise
resolution.
that.
When I'm in the shoebox, I'm all about the ed plan.
All right,
right.
So let's get
just keep that.
Mr.
in mind.
Page, you and I getting together in the shoebox.
Again, I'm excited.
I can feel that. Okay.
Any more new
Yeah.
business? Anyone? Bueller? Seeing none?
Okay, take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, wait, I need the motion first.
Moved.
Okay.
That was
Marge
crisp like a
Boucher,
start
Mr.
shirt.
Cooney, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Crucial, yes, I'm a yes. Blair,
Yes.
Page,
Yes.
thanks. Bill,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, Ms. McDally,
Yes.
Ms. Margin Belcher. Mr. Penny,
Yes.
Ms. LeVar,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Quimby,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen.
Yeah.
We are adjourned and we are 7 minutes ahead of what we said on the agenda.
Sure.